Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 o'clock here in Fairbanks, Alaska. So we're going to be highlighting an event today as part of Alaska Startup Week. So we're in the third day of Alaska Startup Week. It started on Monday and goes through to Friday, and there's even some events across the weekend. So if you're interested in more innovation entrepreneurial opportunities across Alaska, then please do search Alaska Startup Week 2021, and there's at least 50 events across the week, so I'm sure there's something that will interest all of you. In addition to today's panelists and the topic that we'll be highlighting and talking about today, which is Department of Defense innovation teams and innovation cells in Alaska. Just to remind you all where I'm based at the University of Alaska Fairbanks' Center for Innovation, Commercialization, and Entrepreneurship, shorthand term Center ICE. We're an innovation hub based within UAF, but we also have a footprint across the University of Alaska system, and also a footprint across innovation and entrepreneurship in the state. And one aspect of that has been connecting into the work going on within our Department of Defense and the US Air Force based representatives that we have here, the leaders and the directors of their programs and their teams, and how the skills that we have and the capabilities that we have within the academic environment can help some of the project work that's going on, but also to highlight the innovation that's already occurring within these programs, both the design thinking approach, the sort of philosophy of how to iterate upon challenges and needs to look to develop out a solution, and the different aspects of Alaska that is being brought to the table to help the Department of Defense and the Air Force in its mission here in the state. So today we have two of these Sparks teams, Spark cells as they're called, that is across the Air Force. So we have First Lieutenant Griffin from Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson, and that's part of the Arctic Spark, and he's the director of that group. And then we have Sergeant Nicholas Kavanagh calling in, and Sergeant Kavanagh is the director of the Iceman Spark that's at Arlson Air Force Base in the interior of Alaska, and Lieutenant Griffin is down in the J Bear in Anchorage. So I'll pass it over. Maybe I'll pass it over first to Sergeant Kavanagh at Arlson Air Force Base. And before I do that, I just want to recognize the traditional lands that we are residing upon here in Alaska, and those based at the Trothieta campus and the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And Fairbanks are on the lands of the Denana people of the Lower Tanana River. And we are all on traditional lands, whether we're in Alaska and other parts of the US, and we recognize them for their past, current, and future stewardship of these lands. So on that note and that recognition, I want to pass it over to Sergeant Kavanagh to talk a little bit more about the Iceman Spark team and sort of the philosophies behind what it's been doing and the different projects that have been going on. And then I'll pass it over to Lieutenant Griffin to talk about what's going on at JBER. So over to you, Sergeant Kavanagh.
Hey, thanks, Peter. Appreciate you guys taking the time. I am driving, so I apologize. I won't have my camera on. But yeah, so Iceman Spark and Spark cells in general. So what this whole innovation is in the Air Force, it's been trying to be we've been trying to push innovation for decades now. But the impetus behind Spark cells and why we exist is really just so we can accelerate change. And the reason we need to accelerate change is to prevent us from losing in a near peer adversary fight. So our role at Iceman Spark is to bridge the gap between the strategic push to accelerate change, to innovate, to solve tough problems. And what do you do? How do you do that at the tactical? In other words, how do you do that at the base level? How do I do that at Arlson Air Force Base? How does Lieutenant Griffin and his team do that at J-Bear and Anchorage? How does any base do that, right? It's inherently complex. So we kind of break our mission down into three different areas. The first being coaches. So our job is to coach airmen through the processes that it takes to either prototype an idea, to solve a really tough problem set, to help them further develop something that's truly innovative, and then also connect them. I'm going to be pretty brief on that piece because that's really what we focus on the base side for the airmen. But what I want to dive deeper into is the connecting piece. So imagine national security. Imagine there's a bar stool, and national security is sitting at the bar, and he's having a beer. There's three legs on that stool, right? And And these are the three connecting pieces that we need as an Air Force, as a Spark Cell specifically, to really solve these tough problems and accelerate change at the pace at which we need to accelerate it at. So there's three legs on that bar stool that national security is sitting upon. They make up academia partners. So Peter briefly mentioned our partnership with Senator Rice and the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Lieutenant Griffin is setting up their relationship with UAA. We have partnerships with MIT Accelerator, UC Berkeley, Stanford, a lot of different schools and academics, and we're able to leverage their experience and their research to help us solve some of the tough problems that we face. One of the other legs is government partners. So these are internal to the government and folks that are able to help us cut through the bureaucracy of solving the problems. And most of the time that bureaucracy is self-imposed. So having these agencies that are really there to support us really helps us break down the barriers and accelerate the change at the pace at which we need it to happen. And then the last one, which is really the kind of the purpose of Startup Week, is industry. So when people think of defense contractors, they often think of huge companies, right? Like, for example, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Booz Allen Hamilton, like these huge organizations, right? They do a lot for us and they do an awesome job. I mean, they built our F-35s, one of them did. So definitely grateful to them. But with that said, they've become such a large organization themselves that the pace at which they move is becoming slower and slower, right? Because they're a larger organization. So us in Spark Cells, we're looking to leverage these startup companies, these smaller companies, and really be able to fill the gap between what we can fix ourselves and what we need industry's help with. Those three legs are what makes up our ability to accelerate change and ultimately keep that stool up and uphold national security and the Constitution. So I want to just dive a little bit deeper on industry, kind of explain how we do that. And I'd be more than happy. I really want to answer y'all's questions as we go forward after Lieutenant Griffin talks. But some ways that we leverage industry on smaller scales is just traditional acquisitions. So what I mean by that is if we have a problem and then we find somebody that has a commercial off-the-shelf solution, we can take money and we can go there and buy that from you. That's kind of the traditional model. Now, with larger projects, oftentimes what we see is that these projects become 5, 10, 15-year projects. And honestly, it hurts us because it takes us that long to fix that problem. Also, it's a huge impact, right? A small business, for you guys to have to wait 10 years to actually get something funded and to try something, and would have to come to the table with a 100% solution. That's really hard for a startup to do. So some of the ways we've been tackling that, and we being the Air Force, specifically AFWorks, they've been trying to break into the small business world and these startup worlds to leverage their technology and then invest in those companies so they can help us solve our problems. One of the ways that we've been doing that is through SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research. So these are congressional funds that are awarded to small businesses, and phase 1 is $50,000. The purpose of phase 1 is customer discovery, and then you move over to phase 2. And by customer discovery, I mean, let's say you have a specialty, and ironically, we have a really good example on the call with Chris from Aquagua, which we could do a deeper dive into later. Chris and I can. So you have a specialty, right, or something that you're interested in helping out in, or just a set of skills, and you have a company around that skill set, or maybe you just have an idea that you think would help industry, or excuse me, help government, and you go and during that phase 1, you're trying to find a customer inside the U.S. Air Force, and SBIR is not only Air Force, by the way. It's actually a lot of different places. But we've been using it quite heavily. So you're trying to find a customer in that phase 1, you find a customer, and then it's customer discovery. Like, all right, what do you need? What problem do you have? How can my technology help you solve it? And then what does phase 2 look like? What does this prototype look like? How can we test this? So that moves to the phase 2 SBIR contract, which is a $750,000 contract through AFWorks and A4L. And then that allows you to prototype that thing, whatever that thing is. And then so the phase 1, and Chris, correct me later if I'm wrong here, I might be off track, but phase 1 is traditionally around 6 months, and then phase 2 is 12 to 15 months. And then, or 12 to 18 months, excuse me. And then moving into phase 3 is like, all right, guys, the prototype went awesome. You guys helped us solve our problem. We need to scale this. This is huge. Like, we want this for everybody. Or, hey, this is a larger project. The prototype did a piece of that. We want to expand it now. So phase 3 is big, big dollars, big contracts. It depends on the contract, but it can go upwards to anywhere of to 30 million, depending on the project, and above that with traditional acquisition help. So that's a way for small businesses to leverage us. And then also it really benefits us, because going back to that timeline, that 6 months and then 12 to 18 months compared to that 5, 10, 15 years for problem solving on projects, that's a dramatic difference. That's how we accelerate change. And that's how we prevent ourselves from losing in a near peer adversary fight. So Iceman Spark, we serve as coaches. We serve as connectors to government, industry, and academic partners to solve the tough mission-related problem sets that we have. And then lastly, we're just committed to accelerating change. We're just a bunch of entrepreneurs inside of the military. Some of us are actually entrepreneurs on the outside ourselves. And we're just really dedicated to our country. We're dedicated to this mission, and we understand that we need industry's help. So I appreciate you guys being here, and I appreciate you guys having taken the time. Chris, I would love to talk about our example. I think it kind of illustrates academia, and then also the SBIR process as well, and the pain that we've gone through with that. But yeah, so that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Griffin, and then love to answer any questions as we go forward.
Thanks, Nick, for that. It was a great summary of sort of the ideals of the Department of Defense and the Air Force that you two are representing in this direction of innovation, and how to bring in some of these newer technologies and these newer startups that are out there that are building something in the industry sense, but also that can solve some of the challenges and needs that the Department of Defense and the Air Force and other military agencies have. So yeah, it'd be great we can delve into some detail on the individual projects and opportunities. And I see that Chris is online, so if that's something that we can do, where I can bring Chris forwards. But I'd like to bring in Lieutenant Griffin to talk about what has been going on within the Arctic Spark at Joint Base Armandorf-Richardson, some of the different projects and the sort of setup that they have there, and what they've been doing in that aspect of a different base location within the state down in the South Central. And I'll pass it over to Lieutenant Griffin.
Hey everybody, my name is Trey Griffin. Thank you, Dr. Webley, for the introduction. I serve as the lead for the Arctic Spark at Joint Base Armandorf-Richardson in Anchorage, as Peter mentioned. And Cav did an excellent job on explaining the background of why spark cells exist and what we do here in Alaska that's kind of unique for spark cells. So thanks a lot for that information, Nick. We tailor a lot of our innovation to the Arctic environment that we live in. The National Defense Strategy, the past couple of years, has focused pretty heavily on the Arctic region in particular, because of Alaska's really strategic location for national defense. The military has been up here for decades, since at least World War II, and Alaska plays a crucial role in early warning and defense for the homeland. So to that end, innovation up here in the Arctic region, based on the specific environmental challenges that we have up here that the lower 48 doesn't necessarily face, and then the strategic nature of the area, at least from the military's perspective, is our reason for being. That's the why behind what we do. Our innovation lab is all volunteer. So we consist of people from a multitude of career fields across the base that care a lot about innovation, about doing new things, about providing education for members across the base. So at Elmendorf, we have F-22 aircraft, we have C-17 aircraft, And we also have Army counterparts, being a joint base. So we have pretty much every career field in the Air Force represented at this base, from aircraft mechanics to IT professionals, civil engineers. And that makes for a really good blend of innovation in our lab, because we're able to pull volunteers from this vast talent pool and breadth of experience and knowledge, and all come together and find ways to empower people. So the way that we go about our mission is by doing local outreach here at our base. And by that, I mean, we exist to reach out and get to the lowest levels possible, the junior enlisted airmen, the 18 to 20-year-olds that are boots on the ground, working on tough problems day in and day out, whether that's in a logistics squadron, getting fuel from point A to point B, the civil engineer squadron, building new structures and keeping up the flight line. Excuse me. We recognize that they're the ones that face the most problems at work, and most of our volunteers, being non-commissioned officers, sergeants, and officers, we recognize that we generally serve as middle management in our day jobs. So we want to provide junior members with a space where they can come in, learn about all kinds of different capabilities that they could use to meet their needs, and then we coach them through the process of innovation while making sure that they understand they're the project champion for getting their innovation across the finish line, so that when a project does come to fruition, there's a huge sense of ownership on the part of the member, and their leadership can recognize them for successfully getting after the DoD's priority of innovation. So in summary, on that point, I like to say that we exist to match requirements, i.e. problems, with capabilities. So that's whether that's an airman comes in and brings a problem to us and we teach them the specific tools that we have that might be able to solve that problem, or if we just cast a wide net and we teach people about all kinds of tools that we provide, and then they go out into their work centers with a new eye for innovation, and they apply the capabilities that they learn in our space to find requirements that could be solved. Kavanaugh kind of touched on this. Another big point for us is in the DoD, we are infamous for bureaucracy. There's lines and lines and lines of red tape to get through to solve problems sometimes. And so the Innovation Lab, we have special access to leadership, and we have a lot of weight on the base to help people get things accomplished in a quick manner, and really break through some of that bureaucracy that really intimidates the younger members. Kavanaugh mentioned that the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, a 4-star general, and the senior most officer in our service, published his Accelerate Change or Lose mantra at the beginning of this year. And under that banner, he published 3 action orders. Number 1 was caring for airmen. We have to really take care of our people and make them feel valued. But number 2 was breaking down bureaucracy. And so that's the action order that we're specifically trying to get after at the Arctic Spark. We are trying to actively break down barriers and show people that they can get things done in new and creative ways without necessarily having to ask permission from 10 different people in the chain. Granted, there are safeguards, but that's a big focus area for us. Some of our recent events that we do to encourage innovation, we do an annual Spark Tank competition. So last year was internal to JBEAR, and what we did was we had 7 different pitches from across the base, junior level members, come in and brief the base commander, a colonel who's been in the Air Force for 26 years and manages the entire installation. She had $150,000 to award that day, and every project that was pitched got funded either partially or completely. So we have that annual competition. This year, we're partnering with our local contracting squadron. They're the office that has the most connections in the local community with industry. We're partnering with them to come up with what we're calling JBEAR Pitch Day. So it's a twist on the innovation competition where instead of having members bring their solutions and ask for funding, we just have members tell us what problems they face. Then we're going to go out and solicit from industry in the local area to try to find solutions that maybe the Air Force can't naturally procure. And we'll have them pitch for funding and make sure that they can meet the members' needs. We also collaborate across the whole Pacific Air Force's area of responsibility. So there's an office in Hawaii that provides oversight and collaboration for spark cells across the entire Pacific Air Forces. So that includes bases in Japan and Korea. And we've built a really good working relationship with them, and we're learning a lot from our fellow spark cells overseas with some of the unique challenges that they have to solve. a couple of projects I wanted to highlight just real quick, and I apologize I don't have pictures handy. But just to give an example of the kind of innovation that we deal with, there's an airman in the munition squadron. So they handle and load ammunition on the aircraft when they need to go out and train. They have to transport munitions from one place to another, and they have to use a trailer that requires a special kind of hubcap. And those hubcaps can get kind of expensive, but their standard operating procedure is pretty vague on how to install that hubcap. It just says to put it in place with a hammer. What members normally do is they put the hubcap in place, they take a hammer on this soft piece of aluminum, and they bang it into place a couple times. After about 5 or 6 installations, the hubcap is useless because it's dented beyond all repair. So what this airman did was he came in and designed a 3D manufactured piece to serve as an intermediary between the hammer and the hubcap. So the hubcap fits inside the device, and then he hits on the 3D printed material. It's a lot more sturdy than the aluminum, and that has already paid for itself. That member is actually pursuing intellectual property rights on that design because that could easily be implemented Air Force wide. We've also partnered with our local medical group. They manage the hospital and designed a very small, very simple 3D printed piece that helps secure patients to hospital beds in a more safe and comfortable way for them. Some of the hospital beds, depending on the size of the patient, whether they're very small or very large, and depending on the type of procedure that's going on, some of the hospital beds were inadequate to secure patients down. So there was a doctor here that 3D printed a piece that provides just a little bit more of a stopgap and allows some more flexibility on safely restraining patients to beds and making life more comfortable for them in a stressful situation. The last project I want to highlight has to do with the F-22 that we have here at Elmendorf. So the past couple of years, we've been implementing the Agile Combat Employment concept. And by that, the F-22s fly out to remote sites and practice sustaining a makeshift base for any length of time. A unique challenge with that is the ladders that the pilots use to get in and out of the jets don't get transported out to the remote sites. And so we have a few members right now that are working on designing a prototype ladder that can be stored inside the jet and then unrolled when it gets to a really remote location. That way the pilot can get in and out of the aircraft comfortably and in a reasonable amount of time when he lands at the distant end. So those are a couple of innovations that are going on here that we've been working on. I wanted to close out today by talking a little bit about what I've learned in particular about leadership in the innovation sphere. I've been volunteering in this role for a couple months now. And the biggest thing that I've taken away that could apply to the audience of this Startup Week event is empowerment. And by that, I mean, in the Air Force, we have a really bad habit of feeling like we have to ask permission to do everything. We as a service are generally risk averse, and for good reason, because we manage multi-million-dollar aircraft and lots of specialized equipment. And there's lots of safety concerns, and people's lives could be on the line if we take a risk that we should not. But in the innovation sphere, what I've learned is if you can explicitly tell people, I am empowering you to build this idea or run with this idea or build a new program how you see fit. I just want to be updated and I will approve almost anything that you put in front of me. I have been constantly surprised by people's ingenuity and creativity and their ability to solve tough problems in ways that I could never have dreamed, especially in very technical heavy areas or career fields. So I just wanted to leave you with that as leaders in the innovation space, if you can build a good team of people who really care to be there, who are passionate about what they do, and if you can empower them and give them the tools that they need and let them know that they have the ability to make decisions and take risk, and that you will cover their backs if they need it, it will pay dividends in terms of not just the bottom line, but people's satisfaction at work and the types of innovation that you're able to produce. So that's all I had, and I look forward to everybody's questions. And Dr. Webley, back over to you.
Lieutenant Griffin, thanks, Trey. Yeah, that was very, very philosophical discussion about at the end there about what you're seeing in terms of the change that's happening. And I think it highlights a couple of aspects. Both yourself and Sergeant Kavanagh have highlighted individual projects where either it's a enlisted person or an officer that's bringing a challenge that they see on a day-to-day basis, or if it's a base-wide challenge where it goes on to a small business innovation. But you're also building capabilities and capacity in the individuals that are coming in and joining the program. So you're building up their skills that if they do leave the Air Force or leave the military after a certain amount of time, they want to go off into the civilian world, or they want to go home to where they came from, they can take those skills and actually then apply those outside their time whilst serving in the military. So it's this resilient personnel as they stay within the military, but also as they leave. So whether they are Alaska Native and they're going back, Indigenous, and they're going back to their home community, where they can then see, oh, I've learned these skills of some agile innovation, I can apply those to my community. Or if they're going off and starting a business, they then can actually use those skills in, as well as whether they were in the engineering division or if they were in the munitions division or whatever that division was that they were serving. They also have these additional skills that they can take and apply and improve the environment that they're then moving back into as they leave the military. So it's sort of this resilient person that both can innovate and within the military if they continue their career, or if they leave and go outside into the civilian world, whether it's working in a university environment, their local community, federal contract, or wherever they end up, they've got these skills that they can then apply into those environments. So that was something that was brought up on one of the Q&As, was sort of how to involve the full diversity that exists within the United States military to build up these innovative trainings, these sort of resilient capabilities, these capacity building aspects, in addition to looking to solve some real timely needs and challenges that can make more effective. And the Arctic mission that DoD and the Air Force and other military agencies have in the US Arctic, but also it's those individuals improving additional skills and getting more training that they can then apply outside and inside the military, as depending on where they end up based on their career. So,
oh, I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you were sorry. Time permitting, if I can just, you hit a really key point that I want to make sure that I hammer home, because the Air Force in particular really emphasizes investing in people and developing people's skills. And to your point, exactly what you're saying, the reason that the Air Force wants to invest so heavily in people is because we know that everybody will one day leave the Air Force, take off the uniform, and go out into the corporate world or into startups, academia, and into broader society. And we want to make sure that we develop good citizens, people who can take what they learn in the Air Force and really lift everybody around them up when they re-enter civilian society in any kind of sector. That's it. I really appreciate the point that you're making there. Apologies for the interruption.
No problem. It was really a highlighted question on Andre from here in Alaska, just highlighting the native Alaskan indigenous aspects of the military and giving them the innovative training. So ensuring that the diversity of the servicemen, whether they're enlisted or if they're in the officer position, giving them those skills so they do have they become that resilient citizen once they leave, whether they leave after a short time or if they leave after a 20+ year career, they're still, how can they take those skills that they've gained, both serving and innovative approaches, back out into society to be able to build up the community that they go into, whether it's a new community they're going into or if they're going back to the community where they came from or where their family is based, or where they grew up, and how to apply those to grow up and build those communities, whether it's businesses, whether it's community projects, whatever those might be. They can apply those skills to those communities and build up those communities along with themselves as once they've left. So yeah, I thoroughly appreciate that statement you also made. So before we jump into maybe specifically highlighting the connection that Sergeant Kavanagh made on these SBIR opportunities, are there there's other aspects I know that are going on within the Air Force and DoD in terms of innovation. There's the National Security Innovation Network. There's these things called X-Force fellowships. What are other ways that people could connect with yourselves at JBER and ILSN? So if somebody had an interesting idea, or they're wanting to learn more about what are some projects that they could connect with you on, are there ways that they can connect into the wider Air Force innovation Would it be through partners, like connecting with myself at Center ICE and finding out what the options are, or would it be directly connecting with you yourselves as the individuals? And obviously it depends on the individual and their background and what's possible in terms of those connections. Or is it recommended to go and look at some of these wider DoD innovation programs, these hackathons, these what's coming out from the Defense Innovation Unit? Are those some of the ways to connect in? Because based on the individuals calling in, they may be interested connecting locally where they live. There may be some from outside Alaska. What are some good ways for those looking to connect into this innovation space that's existing within the Air Force?
For Arctic Spark in particular, we get most of our contacts directly. So people are free to reach out to us. We have an email address at jber@arcticspark@gmail.com. And we have firms and individuals from the local community and from down in the lower 48 that reach out to us directly, looking for challenges that they might be able to help us solve, and new capabilities that they can provide that we necessarily haven't thought of before. So we've developed a lot of good relationships that way. And then we also can leverage our internal connections within the Air Force to get people in touch with AFWorks, which is the Air Force level innovation experts. It's very, very relationship based. But for Arctic Spark, we generally get a lot of our contacts directly and also through Dr. Webley, actually, through Center ICE.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that, Craig. Over to you, Nick. I just shared for Lieutenant Griffin, I shared the jbear@arcticspark.com website as well, and they have a social media connection. I know Sergeant Kavanagh, the Iceman Spark, has a social media connection as well. But sort of what are some other ways that those listening in might be able to connect with you at Iceman Spark?
Yeah, Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, the man head with the DIU and all these other agencies that are out there, Instant, AFWorks, BND, just look traditional, and looking at so yeah, there's a lot of different ways to get connected, specifically for Alaska. As JBear, more welcome to reach out to us on social media, or Peter, you can feel free to put my email.
Got Nick. What he was saying is that there's, oh, he's back in, and looks like we lost you there, Nick, briefly.
Oh, did you guys hear me? Yeah,
we're loud and clear now.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome to drop my email in the chat, and I would love to talk about different opportunities. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different problem sets out there, and if you guys have ideas on problem sets you're trying to impact with the DoD, that's definitely an option. But yeah, there's a lot of resources out there, and there's more general open topics. One thing I will say is that there's a lot of buzzwords out there. As you start doing research, you'll likely see JADC2, Joint All Domain Control, and then, you know, ABMS and all these other names and all these other kind of shiny words. There are a lot of companies that are using those shiny words and trying to break into the federal space with those shiny words. So if I wouldn't tailor your thing to that, if that is your specialty, then that's great. But find your niche and just really leverage that, because you know, there's different niches for different problem sets. So yeah.
Great. As I say, I think the sort of setup that both Lieutenant Griffin and Sergeant Kavanagh have of like across their bases that they are, where they are located, and sort of finding those, as Sergeant Lieutenant Griffin said, sort of those boots on the ground, those ones that are in on the day-to-day interactions, and seeing, oh, there's a small innovation. I wonder if an innovation here could make a more efficient process, or could make something more effective to the overall mission of that individual division, right, and that individual program. Then how to do that effectively, but to ensure that the mission can continue, that the safety is ensured, and then that individual therefore can build those up. So it interests me in sort of the process that you've got set up, but also once you get these sort of challenges or these types of innovations, it may be that there needs to be some external connections to be made. Maybe it's a student team working on something. It's something an industry group might have a skill set in, or could be somebody both within our major conurbations, Fairbanks, Anchorage, or Juneau, but it could also be across the whole of Alaska. And there may be something that has been developed in Nome or Utqiagvik or the Seward Peninsula or the Aleutian Islands that's like, oh, there's this organization developing something that could really actually help us answer that and develop a solution to that particular need or challenge, and then how to work together to be able to get them integrated into the process so it can actually happen. And obviously there's policies and protocols that have to be laid out in terms of interactions, but it's really about how to bring those three groups that Sergeant Kavanaugh mentioned at the beginning in terms of the sort of academic aspects that we have in Alaska, the businesses that we have, both obviously the large contractors, but focusing on the startups and the small businesses we have here in Alaska. There's many small businesses that have different skills they can bring to the table, and then also those in the federal space as well, and bring them all together to be able to support our military here in Alaska and the US Arctic and the Arctic mission, and the DoD's mission here, and the stewardship of these lands and the stewardship of the United States in parallel to our stewardship that's been going on for many tens of thousands of years. So I think if there's anybody else who's got any questions or comments across the chat, otherwise I see quite a few things coming into the Q&As, which is great. So anonymous attendee said, what areas of interest do you expect the Air Force to invest in innovative research? And obviously this might be your personal opinion rather than the Air Force itself, but what are some of the places where there could be innovative research going on? I'm just bringing up, is there any connections in the Pacific Northwest Accelerator Center in Seattle? And then I'd be happy to share some of the examples of where the academic environment, and UAF in particular, has worked very closely with Sergeant Kavanaugh on research projects. So I guess my first question is whether you can answer that from your positions, as you are both serving within the military, or if it's your personal thoughts on what might be some of these large, what areas of interest could be the next large innovative research areas for the Air Force, if that's possible to answer on from your side.
So this is Trey Griffin from Arctic Spark again. This is my personal observations. I see a lot of investment going into process improvement. That's where the Air Force can really cut down on a lot of wasted man hours and wasted materials. An example of that is our previous Arctic Spark lead was a logistics officer, and he developed what started as a rough idea for how to improve the process of issuing out deployment gear. As airmen and soldiers go downrange, they have to take millions of dollars worth of equipment with them. Each person is issued like 100 to 200 pounds worth of gear. That's really essential for what they're going to do in a deployed environment. But the process to do so took a lot of effort. It took a lot of people coordinating a lot of different offices. And he came up with a procedural fix to improve that process. It ended up getting picked up by AFWorks to spread across the larger Air Force enterprise because his idea was so promising and had such a big return on investment. Excuse me, he actually got hired to go out to Washington, D.C. For his current assignment and continue working on developing that idea with Air Force level decision makers in the logistics field. So senior leaders, colonels and general officers saw value in his idea, his procedural improvements, and saw a lot of potential for return on investment there. So that's the biggest observation that I can bring up from here at Elmendorf.
Great, thanks, Trey. Anything from your side, from Nick?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So yeah, definitely process improvement. So some specifics on that, like just modernizing, really. I mean, a lot of our stuff is operating back in the 1980s, guys. Like it's such a hard lift to change such a large system. So I know there's a lot of people that are in powerful places that want to change how we do business. So specifically, like for a couple examples, inventory management. We have airmen that are literally hand counting bolts. And then meanwhile, those same airmen are watching YouTube videos of robots going around Amazon warehouses. Like, come on, it's different type of age, and we want to get there. There's a lot of stuff in between. Kind of, Senator Griffin talked about that bureaucracy, and let me say it's real. Also, I'm gonna be kind of short on what I say here, but the way we're gonna fight wars in the future is not the way we fought wars in the past. So this old construct of just moving massive forces to one location and then fighting a war for decades is not the approach that we plan on taking. So we need to think anything that's related to being able to deploy forces in an agile way. So whether that be communications, or that be logistics, or that be transportation, anything that has agile to it is really important, because that quick response and deployment, and then being able to project power in a very quick way while leaving a smaller footprint is vital. And then with respect to communications and infrastructure and network infrastructure and so on, there's so much out there. We just need to modernize. You know, we're the most modern Air Force in the world, but there's a lot of things that, even though we have the most lethal F-35, aircraft around, there's still other things that are lacking. So we're trying to play catch up and pull all these things up forward to contemporary day type of models at a rapid pace. And there is just a lot going on. So trying to do all of those at the same time can be challenging. So agile, and then kind of everything that falls under that.
Thanks for that, Nick. Thanks for that, Trey. So one other comment brought up on the questions was innovative food products. And I'll just highlight one thing to look at is look at the call for proposals when you go into these small business innovation research opportunities and STTRs. Sometimes they are very broad, and sometimes they are very specific on individual tasks. So you may find in one of those specific tasks something focused around food or supplies. So whether I would keep your eyes open in those, either a broad area announcement or the specific small business innovation research opportunities. They come out on a fairly regular basis, and they often will highlight specific topics. So keep an eye open. You may find one, and Lieutenant Griffin and Sergeant Kavanagh highlighted a couple of examples on the larger scale, but you can also keep your eyes open. There may be an opportunity focused in on a topic that is US Air Force and Alaska or the Arctic, and it may be a very specific topic where you have a specialist capability. Another question brought up by one of the attendees was for myself to share some stories on examples where academic environment has been able to integrate in and support some of the base specific problems, mainly, for example, with Eielson Air Force Base, but a growing connection to J-Bear and Lieutenant Griffin is where within the university environment, so whether you are based at UAF, UAA, UAS, or APU, or any university in Alaska, or a college in Alaska, or if you're calling in and listening in from outside, they have these senior design projects, or even you might have an independent research project. And often you get these students just really interested in working on projects that have a direct impact locally in their community. It could be an individual community project, but sometimes you get students that have an interest in supporting the community, our military and our Department of Defense community here in Alaska. So ourselves within the UAF have been connecting with Sergeant Kavanagh, and some of the needs and the challenges that are coming out of the personnel that he's connected with, and seeing how can the university students do some evaluation of what what's commercially available that could answer those questions? Is there an improved solution that could be developed that's specific to the need or the challenge that's been highlighted by Sergeant Kavanaugh's team? Those students can then actually work upon that project as part of their university degree. They can apply for support to buy supplies and commodities. They can even, if it's an independent research project, apply for some stipend support to help them work upon that, where they're connecting to Sergeant Kavanaugh and his team as they iterate and work upon their project. They can do design modifications. They can, or being well, access and talk to the individuals that are in those parts of the base that are actually day-to-day involved and where this need could be integrated. So as a result, over a semester, so over a fall or spring or over the whole year, they're actually moving forwards to develop a solution that has a direct impact locally in the community, be it the military community here. So that's one example. Another one is where we have actually directly connected with the honors program within the university, and they're developing and building upon this environment known as makerspaces, where this is a space, traditionally a physical space, but can also be virtual. And I know Lieutenant Griffin at Joint Base Almondorf Richardson has got some of these maker environments where you've got 3D printers, you've got laser cutters, where you can actually start constructing some of these solutions. So you can work on it in a research project, but then you can go in and start to build them. So we've actually got some problem challenges and some needs from Sergeant Kavanaugh's team, and we now have students in those programs working upon those and gaining class credit for them. Those are going on earlier in their degree program. So they're getting this real world experiential learning aspect whilst being connected and working with our local military establishments here in the state. And we've even had one of the students that's connected on those projects gone on to this program called the X-Force Fellowship. And this is a US-wide part of the National Security Innovation Network, where teams of students from across the country come together and work on them in the summer as a sort of similar process, but you're collaborating with students from across multiple universities to work on a challenge that has been brought forward by a particular part of the US Department of Defense. And one example was the project that a team worked on that was one that came out of Sergeant Kavanaugh's team. And they were actually using and connecting to university facilities, laboratories, cold rooms to be able to test their equipment. So in all, it's this combined approach of what are capabilities and capacities that you might have in the academic environment near to a military base that can be brought forwards and actually support and work on some of these projects that there may not be the ability and capacity internally within the base itself to solve some of those challenges, and therefore you can use the capabilities exterior to the base, whether it be academic or in industry, to help move forward some of these innovative ideas to actually integrate them over time into the operations, ensuring that the integration follows any protocols, any requirements for safe integration to ensure that the mission can continue. I guess I've got a question. So we've got a question here from William. What is the process to get selected for SBIR? Does the individual company require to have its own R&D already in place? So on the, I can answer that from an innovation entrepreneurial aspect. So when you see an SBIR opportunity, it would be a small business that can apply. You will see the call for opportunities. You will see the topic that you're highlighting for, and often there's a program manager that manages that SBIR opportunity. And my recommendation as somebody that's been involved in these SBIRs as a subcontract on the academic side, but also with my business hat in the past, would be to talk to that program manager. That person is managing all of the SBIRs or could be specifically managing a specific track, and talk to them. Find out what they're looking for, what's the overall aim of the support, because often they can give you some insight into what they're looking for in a submission. And then the business that's applying would then apply for that SBIR through whatever portal that the organization is using for the submission, and you would need to include specific details of your specific plan that you're going to carry out. You would have your budgets in terms of the request for the funds, and those would get reviewed. And then each organization might have its own slightly different review process, and then you would either hear yes or no if you've been successful in that small business innovation research process. If William, who made the comment, if you're interested to know more, I have a colleague here at UAF, and we're starting to build out what's known as sort of like an SBIR bootcamp to help businesses in terms of being more prepared for that SBIR process and understanding what's required and what documentation. So please do reach out to myself. I'll put my email in the chat on that, and I'll be happy to connect you with that individual. So I guess my last question, and I'm sorry, Chris, in terms of time to bring yourselves forwards, but I got a question for Lieutenant Griffin and Sergeant Kavanagh. How can the statewide community help your teams, yourselves, and innovation in the Department of Defense bases that are here in Alaska move forwards? What are some of the, an ask from us as the community to you, how could we help you move forwards and grow and implement more of these opportunities into your bases? So maybe first to Trey, as you brought your camera up, and then I'll have Sergeant Kavanagh respond.
At Elmendorf, I think the most that we've learned from the local community is just being able to observe how people do business in the innovation space outside of the military context. Since all of us are volunteer and we have day jobs in traditional military units, we can sometimes, I guess, get trapped by our lack of outside perspective. And so it's been great when we have opportunities to have guest speakers, whether from academia or industry, that come and talk at our Spark events about how they do innovation or how they do agile processes in the civilian sector. So just reaching out and offering to share any knowledge is usually a huge benefit for us. And then just learning about what local industry can provide that we don't even realize. So we've had a couple of different materials vendors reach out to us, excuse me, to talk about some capabilities that we honestly weren't aware of that could meet some of our needs in hugely more effective ways. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. And I think I'll probably be reaching out to you personally about having us at Center Ice come and talk about how we built this connection with Arlington Air Force Base. That might be a good first step of demonstrating how that works on an academic to DoD side. Sergeant Kavanagh, anything from your side and Iceman and Arlington?
Sure. Yeah. So we kind of have a unique mission inside of Alaska. We are projecting power from the Arctic environment, and then our primary focus is the Indo-PACOM theater. So China, Russia, right, and then a smattering of missions in the Arctic. So there's a lot of opportunity to solve some of the tough problems that we face inside of the Arctic, and then additionally, how do we take those same type of the same assets to a completely different environment. So environmental problem sets is a big one. So thinking temperature and storage, and then the usefulness inside the Arctic environment. For example, keeping batteries alive. Just how do you keep a battery alive at -40 for an extended period of time? So yeah, that's really it. I mean, and then I really like what Lieutenant Griffin said. There's things out there that we don't even know about, and our teams are the ones that can really help bring those technologies in, and we want to know about them. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I promise I will never say that someone's idea is dumb or anything like that. I would be happy to have a conversation, and I'll give you real feedback, and I'll let you know, hey, I think there's applicability here, or no, I don't think there's applicability here. But happy to do that. And then if I could, Peter, if it's okay to talk on the SBIR process, just briefly.
Yeah, please go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, so SBIR is huge, and it's a really great tool for small businesses to break into the space. And Chris, I don't know if you want to drop your email in the chat so people can reach out, but SBIR is not easy. I wouldn't say that. It's definitely a sharp learning curve for new businesses, new small businesses. There's a smattering of consultants out there that can help you through the process. Peter is a great asset. There's companies that have already gone through the process that can help you guys. And then I'm more than happy to sit down and help you if we're working together on a SBIR. Specifically answering the question about R&D, research and development being completed. It really depends on what the project is. If you have an idea and you have some science to back it up, depending on what the thing is, and then potentially a prototype, that may be all it takes to put in a submission. Because really, at the end of the day, you're solving a problem for us. So phase one is customer discovery. So you got to figure out what that problem is before you adopt your technology to our problem. So yeah, definitely encourage you to push forward. Then yeah, you're allowed to apply for as many phase ones as you want, but recommended, you got to be ready to action on it as well. So don't just go apply for it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely about being applying for the opportunities, but also having, if you are awarded it, the capacity to complete that work. And as Chris points out, he'll be highlighting Aquaga is also part of Startup Week with us, and we've got an event on Friday at 11. So please take a look at Alaska Startup Week's website, and I'll be bringing that up for those calling in, and you can listen into Aquaga's journey and the work that they've been doing with the Iceman Spark Cell. I noticed some other comments in the Q&A on different aspects of interactions with Alaskan rural environments and rural communities, and some of the topics that were raised up, that there has been some collaborations between ourselves at the university and Iceman on some of those topics. But I would say if there's something that you think that would be a connection to our innovation cells, then they both said that they would be happy to connect with you. So please do reach out and see how the conversation goes. Keep an eye open for opportunities where you see where there could be an applicability to connect with some of these funding opportunities, where you could be developing a solution both locally and also to support some of our Department of Defense missions. But what I'll do is, just to wrap up today, is I'd like to thank both Lieutenant Griffin at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson's Arctic Spark and Sergeant Kavanagh at Iceman Spark at Arlson Air Force Base for their time today, for their discussions on some of the projects that's going on, some of the work that's occurring within our innovation teams here within the state, in the state and our Department of Defense bases, and also some of the topics that we discussed on sort of small business innovation research, and ways that people listening in and those following on the video can also connect up with the teams here in the state. So just to finish off, Alaska Startup Week is continuing. We're now into the afternoon of day 3. So there's more events going on across the state, both virtual and in person. There's some open houses coming up. There's a pitch fest going on in Anchorage tomorrow as part of Activate Alaska, or Accelerate Alaska, I should say. There's some online events on building your online business capabilities and how to use some of these tools for business development. There's a presentation tomorrow if you're interested in what the patents and intellectual property, that might interest anybody. So please do sign up, and for anything online, you would get a Zoom link or some other form of online platform link. But just wanted to thank our panelists today, our attendees. Hopefully we were able to give you an insight into what's going on within 2 of our spark cells here in the state. And these spark cells are growing across other aspects of the Air Force in other Air Force bases. So if you are outside Alaska and listening in and watching online, then maybe there's a spark cell near you. But just want to say thank you to Trey, Lieutenant Griffin, and Nick, Sergeant Kavanagh, for your time today. And I wish you all a good rest of your week.